with Cutting the Motion with me, the main host, Yavor Ivanov. And today in the fourth episode, with me is my co-host, Kubrat Ivanov, and our special guest of the day.
Today we're joined by Dylan Connor, who's travelled all over the world to graduate from many different universities. He is graduated from U.S.A in Ireland, the University of Leuven in Belgium, and also graduated his PhD from U.C.L.A, as everybody has definitely heard of that one. And today he teaches in the State University of Arizona, where he teaches geography, statistical analysis, and computer programming. Hello, Dylan. How are you feeling today?
Thanks so much. Feeling great. Thanks for that.
Welcome, Dylan. Thank you for taking the invitation and coming today. I know you're a very busy man and really appreciate it that you came in today. And we have a few questions to ask. I will let my co-host to start with first two.
So, to kick it off right now, that anybody's watching here, what exactly do you do? If you were to say it in the simplest terms before we start going onto the deep end of it, how would you introduce your profession and what you do currently to somebody that's new?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'm a professor, and just to clarify in the introduction, so we're at Arizona State University.
Arizona State, sorry.
You were almost there.
Yeah.
So I'm a professor, a tenured professor now at ASU. So the job of a professor basically has three buckets.
Yeah.
One is teaching, one is research, and the other is service. And so teaching, everybody gets that part of being a professor. You know, you lecture, you teach big classes, seminars, and statistics, programming. Those are my areas. But actually, what really advances you as a professor is your research. And so most of actually what we do is not actually teaching. That's what people see. But actually, where we focus really is researching specific topics, and I'm happy to, tell you a bit more about what I work on and what gets me excited.
Okay, well, this links into our second question, which is, how do you become a professor? What are the steps that you have to do, or what do you have to graduate to become one officially?
Yeah, so becoming a professor it's not a straightforward path. It's not it's not like becoming a plumber or an accountant or something like that.
Yeah.
There's no professor degree.
Yeah.
So usually what most people do is they do their undergraduate just like everybody else. Often they'll do a master's degree in a particular area. And then really what's key and what the union card is for being a professor is your PhD.
Okay. Some disturbances, but going back onto, would a professor that's just starting off and a professor that's more experienced, would something that distinguishes the both of them, as you said, about their reputation? So you know how you said they do their own specific research so that they can build it up on their resume. Would you say that's what elevates a professor from their starting career to when they progress in the future?
Yeah, for sure. So there's the path of a professor, there's actually, particularly in the U.S., where academic research and kind of a lot of the high performance research takes place in the U.S. and the big universities that you've heard of. There's actually an interesting step. Some people have heard about tenure.
Yeah.
And so tenure is, most people don't really know what it means, but it's a really big deal in the American system, because basically what happens is they come to you and they give you a job.
Yeah.
And they basically say, we'll take you on, and then for 4 or 5 years, your job is to teach your classes, but most importantly, to produce research. So research is like new knowledge, new understandings of your problem, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And after 5 years, they look at your research record and basically say, is this of the required standard to for this person to work here forever? And so when you get granted tenure, you're basically granted job security for the rest of your career in that university.
Okay.
And so it's actually kind of interesting. Are you familiar with tenure, or is it?
No, actually no, but I learned something new right now. So
let me actually just give you the historical, the kind of history of tenure, which is kind of interesting. So there have been different tenure systems all over the world for a long time, but the main purpose of it was that in the kind of McCarthy era in the U.S., the kind of Cold War era, there was a lot of pressure being put on academics to take positions for the government, for business, for different interests, and to take certain positions to kind of endorse those positions. And so what the universities partly said was, well, we need to somehow protect the integrity and the academic freedom of professors so they're not being influenced by, their jobs or something like that. And so that's actually why tenure was brought in, to kind of protect you from, being fired if you take the wrong position, and to kind of protect the truth in some way, right? So that's the history of tenure and kind of why it exists. It's not just it's not just an easy job for the boys.
That's very interesting.
So after that 3 to 5 year, you'd say more stressful period after, obviously if you've been accepted, you can kind of ease off and be like, I'm here for the rest of the time, or do you take it in a little like that?
So I think some people do that, right? There are a small number of people who do kind of take advantage of the system or whatever.
Yeah.
But to be honest, to get to the stage where you get tenure, you're a pretty motivated, driven person who really cares about your work. And most professors are, super motivated, and not by money, but by kind of ideas and kind of pushing forward whatever they're focused on. So there's definitely you have a period basically where that could happen, and or maybe you want to work on something that's bigger or longer term. And I have friends who've set up podcasts, for example, because they want to do like academic outreach. You can't do that before tenure because you don't have the time. It's work, right?
Yeah, and aren't you also the youngest professor to be tenured at the school that you attended?
Yeah. So that was a nice honor, and I'm still the youngest.
Yeah,
I'm 5 years in the job, and I'm still the youngest professor.
That's impressive.
That's really impressive.
It was an honor for them to give it to me. So.
Well, I hope this young man give me the chance as well to ask some questions. It's really, really interesting. My first question would be, as well, maybe simple, but also in the same time interesting. What sparked the interest in social science and population geography?
Yeah. So what got me interested?
What got you interested? Sometimes when you were in a university in U.S.A. or in Belgium when you will study your masters, or just something else sparked this interest.
So it's like a long, complicated story, and so to make it not too long. So most people imagine for professors and people who do this research, they must have been brilliant students all the way along, and very smart people.
That's what people have.
That wasn't me. So I was not a good student in secondary school. I mean, I always felt like I could do the work, but I didn't study. And in Ireland, the junior cert, I didn't do any work for that. And it actually wasn't really until kind of the Leaving Cert year that I really kind of started to kind of do some work to make sure I got into college. But I was never interested in schoolwork and studying. And it wasn't until actually I started to get toward the end of my undergraduate degree, and it was in U.S.A. in economics and geography, that I actually started to read kind of more advanced stuff and actually learn about actually what a professor is, because I didn't grow up around any professors or really know anything about it. And it was really actually as I started to see, wow, there's a job out there where you can basically work on whatever you want.
Yeah.
You can create new knowledge that people have never, come up with new ideas that people have never thought of before. You can write, people pay you to write. It's tough to be a journalist, but if you become a professor, you get to write your papers, work on specific problems. And it was actually really just my time in U.S.A. and kind of learning actually more about what a professor is and what they do.
Yeah. So coming to close information about the subject you do now and expanding, because you're one of the innovators in this area. So you say the big thing was that you had the chance or the luck to be close to information like the geography, population problems in U.S.A. So if you did not go to U.S.A., you wouldn't maybe be able to be access to such information and wouldn't spark your interest.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I was very lucky that right when I was there, there were a couple of other kind of younger and older professors in U.S.A. at the time who I started to get to know. And then I was like, oh, what they kind of do is really cool. We can talk about the kind of specifics of the work and what, what's interesting there. But it was actually just seeing other people in that job. That why is everybody not doing this?
And now here you are, expert of your area, top one. The next question is, what did the integration of social mobility in United States decline in the last century? We're going now more deeper on what you do, your research and knowledge. Do you think it's declined, the intergenerational social mobility in the United States, the last century?
It definitely is. So just to kind of frame what we mean by intergenerational social mobility. So we're thinking about kids growing up in kind of poorer, lower income families, kind of modest backgrounds. We have this idea about the U.S. that it's kind of like a land of opportunity, right? So we've all heard about the American dream. We all know about immigration.
Yeah.
And so historically, if you look at statistics on what proportion of children who are born into poverty, what proportion of them move on to college or higher incomes as adults, the US historically was an exceptional case. So the reason all of these people were moving from Europe to the US, in the 1880s through to the 1940s, was this kind of amazing opportunity which didn't exist in Europe. But what's really worrying at the moment is that if you look at contemporary trends, the US has actually become much less exceptional. So over time, that opportunity has kind of started to disappear. And so
that's one of the reasons. Yeah, because as far I know that United States holds 2/3 of the wealth in after the Second World War, and now I think it's shifting, change this even financially is changed, and the United States is not anymore this holder of this big wealth, so the opportunity then I guess are much less. Than maybe it's something to do with that as well, but that's a different topic, how they lost this wealth, and maybe the rise of China and all that.
And if I can I say a little bit about the
of course,
where we intervene in
yes,
that?
Yes, of course, please.
So another point is that I'm a geographer, right? And most people, like a professor, are not really sure what a geographer does, right? So you learn about capitals and state maps and borders and history, and that's not what we do. So what we're doing at the moment around this problem of the American dream is we're starting to think about, well, opportunities declining in the US, it's harder for people to move up the ladder. And so then the first question is, well, how do we try to fix that? Or figure out what's causing it? And so what we do as geographers is we actually look across the US and we try to look at which kinds of places are providing opportunities to move people up and what types of places are keeping people down. No. So we kind of do this in a very kind of scientific, big data, machine learning, analytic kind of way. And so we almost nearly try to create experiments where we look at people in one type of place versus people in another type of place and see actually, are the people in this place moving up at higher rates? And if they are, what is it about that place that makes it different from the other ones? And so if you start to do that, we're comparing places here, then you can start to get a little bit of a recipe almost of, maybe there's a good kind of place for opportunity and a bad kind of place. Yeah, we need the bad places more like the good places, right? And so that's where it's almost like the geography of opportunity that we're focused on.
Okay, and with all of that being said, do you think that the American dream is dead?
That's a big question.
Yeah.
So I think the idea of it is not dead, and I think that's the important thing. So, the US rightly gets a lot of flack for not providing the social supports that it should for families, particularly in low income backgrounds. But what it does is there's almost like a belief in the US that no matter who you are, you can move up the ladder. Yeah. Obviously not everybody can move up the ladder, and certainly not everybody does. But it is like a mentality that still exists in the US. Yeah. And actually much more so than Europe in a lot of ways, which is, I think, one of the kind of historical differences. And so I think the idea is still there. People want to try and recover it and bring back that kind of high opportunity context. Yeah. But, at least by today's standards, it looks more similar to the UK than it used to in the past, for example, right?
Okay. And the next question is there a connection with the European immigration and with the social mobility in the United States?
So that's actually a really deep question. It's a great question. And so I actually have a colleague in London, who... Okay, let's break this out a little bit. So there's two parts of it. So one is, in the past, did the people who moved from Europe to the US, did they experience this upward mobility.
Yeah.
And I think they certainly did, right? People moved to the US and they were better because of it. You know, Irish potato famine for 5 decades after that, people were fleeing to the US in search of employment, and a lot of people did very well. Where I was going with the second part, that was kind of a deeper idea, which, you know, it's a bit academic, but it is interesting. A colleague in London has shown actually that the places in the US that deliver the most opportunity for people to move up the ladder are actually places that were settled by Northern and Western Europeans. So actually the regions of the country like Minnesota, Dakotas, parts of Wisconsin, actually a lot of Scandinavians moved into those regions 100 years ago. And today they're still the highest opportunity generating places in the US. And so he's actually onto this really deep idea about the way early settlements of different cultures nearly in particular places have these really long-term effects, and so it's kind of a cool idea. It's kind of deep, but like, wow. When I read that, I was like, wow, that's that, you know.
And do you think it's maybe I don't know, I'll find this question, but what I notice with my eye, like seeing that the people as well, do you think the climate as well it's playing some role? Because you said about different ethnical groups moving from North Europe, West Europe. Now, what I noticed, for example, most of the, for example, Filipino move to California because they find the weather very similar to Philippines. The biggest Bulgarian population is in Chicago, when the weather is almost the same like in Bulgaria. Do you ever read or did research about this, that the people also the weather could be a factor for different ethnical groups from different parts of the world to emigrate to different parts of in United States?
Yeah. So it's not something I've worked on, but if you take actually the example I just gave, which is the Scandinavians moving to Minnesota and places like that, those places are all very like, they're the most similar to Sweden. Norway, So there is this history, and if you've ever been to Boston,
Boston as well. I want to say sorry. Boston is the Irish capital of United States, and that's I was going to say that it's half of the city has Irish blood, at least half, and the weather is very similar to Ireland.
Miserable, like
don't say that. We don't hate that much the weather here.
The greyest city in the US.
The greyest. Well. So would you say as well that in your research and your big knowledge about it, that the different nationalities, like if you, for example, when Germans moved to United States in a particular regions a long time, and now they bring this, for example, they're famous, the Germans, with the discipline, tidiness, that's kind of, in these places they settle, it's like a mirror of their own country. In a way, in some ways.
So are you asking, do they transplant the culture?
The culture and the way they living, the way they develop the settlements, and
I think that I mean they bring superficial things, right? So if you go to New York, for example, that's the like cultural center of bagel making, right? So bagels, you know, New York bagels are famous, and Boston bagels are famous, and that is linked to the Jewish migration into those, and Eastern European migration into those cities. So of course those things are there, and there's great Italian food in the Italian
of course, the Italians.
But I think you're almost asking a deeper question, which we don't know very much about, which is there kind of, do the social institutions and you know the local culture, does it over a long period reflect German settlement or something?
Because we know in the different states as well the laws are different, and maybe the people, the mentality of the people affect these laws. I mean, if they are different and more tougher, say, laws in one state, and the other is more loose about the other things, and the people mentality is something to do with that as well, isn't it? And again, it's important where they come from. Maybe if we trace it, maybe we can answer this question partly, at least.
There's interesting work shown that actually particularly in the South, when you're looking at violence among whites, actually some of the most violent parts of the South in the US were actually settled by people from like Irish and Scottish kind of borderland regions, and those people were often brought in partly to work in the slave trade. And even today, among the descendants or the people descendant from those places and people from Ireland and Scotland, they're still more violent on average today than...
Yeah, we heard about the South in America, that it's more temperamental and more kind of violence in the South.
Yeah, a lot more crime.
Yeah. And here you mentioned the Jews, and I have a question about the Jews here, about them enclaves. You say it one of your researches that when the Jews move outside to these enclaves, they are more successful in their profession and so on, but they kept in the same time their origin, and they were proud, which is great. They are proud of their origin. But my question is that most of the cases when the Jews move from outside of them enclave, they're successful in general in life?
It's hard to say in general. I think that what we know historically is that Jewish immigrants were very economically upwardly mobile compared to other immigrant groups. So it's not so much just that they, everybody who left the enclave did better, but actually we have a paper we're working on at the moment that shows actually that was a very strong mechanism for, economic mobility upwards, which is, people kind of arrive in the new country, they spend a few years in the enclave, and once they've almost built up a kind of familiarity with the country and kind of the city that they're in, and maybe they have a stable job, then they move outside the enclave. And, sometimes they move into more integrated neighborhoods, sometimes they move into kind of more ethnic suburbs kind of thing.
So can we say the Jewish population in the United States is more open for opportunities, and they wouldn't mind to move to different neighborhoods if they see the opportunities for example, more successful business or profession than the other groups in the United States?
Yeah, we it's not exactly, we don't know why, historically we don't know exactly why different people were making different moves, but we do know that they were more likely to move into those places, and the Irish people were more likely to hang together in a lot of cases.
Stay in the same area, doesn't move much.
Exactly,
I had a DNA test, and I didn't know I have as well Ashkenazi Jew blood, only 5%, but a part of that I have as well, 10% from the Middle East, so anyway, and the next question is, I will leave it to my co-host, Kubrat.
Yeah, now that we're talking about all of this immigration and modernization throughout the different cultures that have now grown up, obviously second and third generations there, do you believe that the ethical face of the United States has changed over the last few decades?
Can you say that again? What face?
Has the ethnical face of the United States changed over the last few decades?
Oh, you mean like the ethnic mix of
people
coming
exactly.
in and those kind of things? Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think there's great work on kind of the ethnic history of the U.S., and there's a couple of big breakpoints, early, before the Second World War. It's mainly from Europe, China, Mexico, and then post 1965 you get a lot more movement from Asia, a lot of Central American migration and those kind of things. What's interesting actually is Europe, in the sense that actually when you look at who moves to the US from Europe, in the past it's mainly people on the bottom who are kind of escaping from really poor agricultural conditions, whereas today it's almost flipped around for a lot of countries, which is it's really only the people who are much more educated who can move because of the way the visa systems have changed, and there's a lot more opportunity in places like Ireland, right? And so people are staying, and so so it's not just where people are moving from, but actually different types of people across the different countries, right?
Yeah, and do you believe also that the reasoning has now changed, as you said, that people are now not only moving because they want to escape the worst, that now just because some countries are now more developed than others, and as Ireland is, do you believe that now, as you said, the more educated ones, they also are leaving, not because in the search of a better life, but they're leaving for their own personal reasons? So do you think that now, just as a world that we're more developed, do you believe that there's more reasoning, not just the one, like for an example how in the potato famine the Irish would move out because they're searching for a better life, something new where they can start over? do you believe that that main reason of searching just for a better life isn't only the main reason why they move?
Yeah, I maybe I don't think that's. I think the reasons are always complicated. Right?
Yeah.
So we kind of tell ourselves simple stories like people left because of poverty.
Yeah.
But actually, everybody's decision to move to a new place, as I'm sure you can attest, is very complicated.
Yeah.
Like, you know, maybe you had a friend who moved, or it was a girl you were with and you moved with them, or you know. And so the actual reasons, I think, are probably as complicated today as they were in the past.
Yeah.
The big thing that's changed is, in that historical period, there weren't strict borders. So actually, Europe kind of had a lifeline with the U.S. that when things like a famine hit, a million Irish people at least moved after the famine to the U.S. And it was almost like a safety net.
Yeah.
Whereas today, now there's very strict borders, and you know, these flows just don't exist in the same way. And so that's actually one of the kind of things that we might lament, actually, that you can't just move the way you used to. I mean, there's good reasons, I guess, for it. But
And the EU offer that. I mean, all EU members, they can move anytime you want, and then you can state member. And well, we'll go back to the Irish Americans because I'm interested to know, if you don't mind to answer the question, do you think the children of the second generation of immigrants from Ireland, they did better in the sense that they got better jobs, they got better education, better health service, in generally speaking, in last, say, 50 years, 100 years?
In the US?
In US, yeah.
Than in Ireland, or compared to other people?
The immigrants, for example, the children second generation of with Irish parents, you know.
Yeah. So, but I mean, so when you ask, did they get better?
I mean, did they better than parents? Like, did they get more opportunity for better education, better payments, better jobs?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, when you look, absolutely. So when these Irish immigrants moved to the US, I suspect that they, you know, maybe conditions were better in the US than in Ireland, but life was probably still very hard. But part of it was thinking about your kids and raising a family, and you know, for the same reasons people move to Ireland today. You know, you might struggle a bit, but your kids are going to have access to a lot more opportunities.
So
what's interesting in the States, which not many people know, is actually the people who move to places, the Irish people who move to places like California, Chicago, these places, actually their kids did a lot better than the Irish people who moved to Boston and New York and those northeastern cities. And actually, really, where your parents settled actually had a really big impact on what happened to your kids.
So your chances are higher in this particular successful area and in different areas. Boston, for example, it's not the best area to settle for when it comes to chances for your children. And why is that? What is the reason for that? That if, say, Boston is less prosperous for the kids of the immigrants, Irish immigrants, than Chicago, for example. What is the reason? Is there a reason for it?
Yeah, I think there's two. I think one is it's at least possible, and I think true, that the people who didn't settle in those Irish neighborhoods maybe were a bit more ambitious in some ways. So they almost said, I don't need to move in with a lot of Irish people. I can kind of make it on my own, and then, you know, so that there's something about the parents, which is not necessarily about where they go, but about kind of the mindset of those parents. But I think the other thing is, you do see these penalties, and this goes back to what you were asking about the Jewish immigrants, of settling in a neighborhood with lots of people from your country. And so for the most part, that does tend to be linked to constrained opportunity in some way. So it's almost like you need to get out of that, you know. Maybe moving to an Irish neighborhood in Boston gives you a soft landing, you know, you're kind of, you know, people, they can help you get a job, but eventually you need to get out of those neighborhoods and kind of move to Chicago or you know,
see the different opportunities there. And staying in, working, for example, in a shop, and you're settled there and said, okay, I have a job and that's it. Instead of moving on and try different opportunities when they are there. Okay. The next question is about demography. Is there a huge changes in the aspect of demography in United States between 1980 and to 2010, which you did the research. Is there huge changes in the rural places in United States?
Yeah. So you're talking about rural demography and
Yeah,
those places are changing.
yeah. Is it a lot of changes for this big, huge period of time? Well, huge. It's not that huge, but it's 20 years. But I guess sometimes it's a lot of things can change a lot for 20 years.
So there's a lot of changes. So it's tricky to summarize. But let me. So I'm working on something at the moment that I'd love to tell you about.
Okay.
And so one of the big changes with rural communities in the US is they're getting older and urban places, the whole society is getting older. Rural places in particular are much older. But we've also seen big spikes in poverty levels in rural places. So something like 20-25% of rural places, their poverty rates have doubled over the last 30 years, which is kind of amazing given that we kind of have this idea that everything should always be getting better over time. You have a fifth of rural communities with poverty rates that are twice as high as they were in 1980, which is, disaster.
Yeah.
And so I think that that's probably one of the most striking changes, these kind of really tough, upbringing in these rural
Is it
communities.
because it's less jobs, less investments, and also maybe people don't have as many children as they used to, or there is more reasons than that?
I think there's a lot of different reasons. One of the big ones is the way the economy has actually changed. So if you think about kind of 1970s, 1980s, the economy is much more industrial. There's a lot more extraction jobs, there's kind of coal and heavy industry. And there's rural industry as well, right? So there's like rural, plants and factories and these kind of things.
They're gone.
They're all gone. And so when you look at where the spikes in poverty are, it's all in the industrial regions.
Yeah.
Because today's economy doesn't favor rural places in the same way. All of the good jobs today are in cities, or a lot of them, right? And so that's really kind of pulled the kind of life support from a lot of these rural places.
Yeah.
And would you say it's kind of like that maybe a little bit in the sense of the way it is in Ireland, as you have a lot of the Irish population now that's living here are in Dublin rather than scattered over different counties, because you still have counties with great universities like Galway and Limerick and Cork, but you see people even graduate from those universities and they move over to Ireland just because of the better job opportunities.
In Dublin.
Yeah.
Dublin, I mean Dublin.
I think so. I mean, actually, I'm not. Actually, I'd be interested to hear what you guys think. But I think my sense is that there's a lot of concentration in Dublin, which is why the house prices are through the roof.
Yeah.
A lot of jobs, not enough housing. But I think we're probably already seeing a spillover into those smaller cities. Like there are, every other week you see different firms opening up in Galway or Limerick and places like that. So, and the companies know that the housing is more affordable in those places, and they're going to be able to get the workers. If you want to compete in Dublin, you have to pay people high wages and so on. So, but what do you think? I'd be interested to hear what your sense is.
I see in Bulgaria as well similar problems like the rural areas in the United States. After the communism ceased to exist in Bulgaria, they closed a lot of factories, thousands of them actually. Even one, there was an entire city which from a small country were working 30,000 people in that complex of factories. And Bulgaria was the second exporter of chemicals in the world, but now they're all closed, and if you go to the countryside, it's like most of the place in Bulgaria is like a ghost town.
Yeah.
And ghost villages, ghost towns, and it's even a little bit creepy, And I think what America face now, I'm not as knowledgeable as you about the problem, but what I can see from the surface, it's very similar. Very similar. Young people moving out, they don't want to work for a very little payment or no jobs. They don't know even choice. I spoke with a lot of people in Bulgaria and I said, we love to stay here, but there is no jobs. We love our family, we have a house here, but we don't have any chance to stay here because we don't have a job. Or it's very low pay that you can't support your family, so they move to the urban areas or emigrate. A lot of them emigrate. Bulgaria losing Statistic official is 40,000 every year. Young people, mainly middle age, they emigrate West Europe, United States, Australia. So I think they're facing the same problems, and maybe I don't know if I'm right or wrong. The rising of the Chinese economy, I'm nothing against China, but they're becoming stronger. They produce more products and they sell it in Europe and United States, and industry that were really typical European or United States industries are gone, and then place is taken by the Chinese products. So that's not good for the local population in EU, Bulgaria, in this context, or in United States. So that it's always been since the ancient time economical war. So we are maybe another one which is will shape the future.
Yeah, a lot of competition.
Yeah.
And what's interesting about the migration thing is we tend to talk about it as if it's a good thing and it's exciting, and it is. There's a lot of positives to it, but moving is hard. And it's hard to leave people.
Yeah,
it's a very tough psychological.
Yeah, like you saying, my co-host Kubrat will ask you what is the reasons for emigrating this, and you answer very well, and I think there can be thousands of reasons. I emigrate from Bulgaria because of the corruption, for example. I hate it, and I said no, I'm not going to live in a rotten state with such corruption that unfortunately I predict that will got worse, and it's really later in 22 years. Fortunately, my prediction was right. Bulgarian state is in an extremely bad state. You like statistics? Bulgaria is the fastest dying nation in the world.
Really?
So that's a show. In terms of the demographical decline, it's declined so fast that we are the first. It's not good to be first in these statistics, but the Bulgaria
you don't want to
is.
win that race.
And but that's what corruption does. I think it can rot on any state.
Yeah, and even I have friends now that I keep in touch with since I've known for a few years, and they're like, I'm finishing school here, but I want to move out. I don't want to stay here. This country cannot offer me as much as I can be offered abroad. I can move across Europe, mainly Europe. Some of my friends are planning to move in a year or two over to Germany, for an example, to go to university. They say, we're the European Union, we're just free to go. And even I go, there's no second thought. I go, but once you think about your family, which is a logical question that you may follow up, that emotional attachment to the place, because you're leaving everybody behind there, they go, no, honestly, they go, I'm fed up, I just want to leave. And I suppose that I can understand them as well, because it's the way you see how many other people are living their life, and even when they see me come from where I'm coming from and they see how I'm living my life, and they compare their lifestyle versus my lifestyle, when realistically we're the same age, we're doing the same things, but it's still yet so different. So I feel like that also even kind of adds oil into the fire, and they kind of leave emotions behind, and they just, even in the sense that they want to be caught up with everybody else in the world. So I feel like that's also a big factor that plays in.
And I always admired that as well, because people from maybe where you grew up, or in America, for example, it's the same thing. You often meet people and they have no plan ever to move back to where they came from.
Yeah.
Whereas if you meet an Irish person, I think Irish people are kind of, I don't know why, but they're kind of more homesick, and more like, every time I meet an Irish person, they're often like, oh, when are you going to go home? I was like, assumed that you'll move back.
Yeah.
But I'm always blown away when people are just like, no, I'm never going back.
Yeah.
With all respect where I was born, and I love Bulgaria and all, but I don't want to go back. Even though I was born there, I lived 24 years. What Bulgaria become foreign to me is the corruption grows too much, and one of the reasons I left is because the law is not respected. They are very bad paid, the policemen and all, and they see as well the bad example of the government, how they are corrupt and they become rich, and they don't care about ordinary people. Said, why should I care about doing my job properly when I getting paid very badly? And look at the politicians, all of them, they really don't care. And I know a lot of people complain about Ireland, but the law is respected here, and it follows. If you're driving drunk and they catch you, you lose your license, you can go to jail. In Bulgaria, it doesn't happen. Bulgaria is as well, if I'm not mistaken, we come to the statistic again, because I think statistic is extremely important, because to see the you know better than me how vast is one problem, how deep it is, you have to have statistics. You can presume how it is, but and very well guess how it is, but without the statistic, you don't have a proper lead how to solve the problem. I think.
I agree. Yeah.
And in Bulgaria, if I'm not mistaken, in 2012 or around that time, they die in the street more people, for car crashes than in Iraq. And in Iraq was a civil war. So that's what led to not respecting the law, not following the law, no punishment. The famous book of the Russian author is the, Crime and Punishment. But in Bulgaria, it's crime, no punishment. So, that's one of the reasons, and it can be, go back to your huge research. What do you think is the biggest challenges United States and Europe facing when it comes to the decline of the population? What is the biggest challenges?
I was at a wedding 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago now, and I was blown away by how many people my age and younger, so late 20s, let's say early 30s, who are just not going to have kids. And I was kind of really struck by it. Like, I've never been at an event before where I was sitting at a table with 500 people and everybody was just like, oh no, I don't really want kids. And so when you start to see this, people talk about the collapse of the population in terms of fertility and the aging of the population. It's a real thing,
It is very real, man.
And people say things like, oh, it's about economics and people are just, it's too expensive to have kids. And I think that's obviously true and part of the explanation. But I think a lot of it is actually psychological. It's like there's a psychological change among young people, which is like, I don't want to give my life to 4 kids or something.
That's why I don't want to offend anybody, but it's a weakness as well. I find it as a weakness because you, before even had some difficulties, you already giving up and said, no, it will be too difficult. For example, my grandmother, they were 8 children and they live in one room. But you know what? They all grow up well, and most of them, they did well in life. And I personally think it's nice to have children, and it's kind of a sense of future or something that you accomplish. Then not having children, I think is. Do you think it's because people become very selfish as well? Because why should I, my figure, if I give a birth for the girls, will go, maybe I got a bit fat, and the guy said, oh my God, maybe I have to work harder to provide food. But when you think of it, to have a child is not that expensive. Yes, the prices, the crashes are terrible. This problem has to be tackled. I think that's a different altogether topic. But I think that if somebody wants to have children, no matter, in Ireland it's not that bad. You can have 2 or 3 children and you will survive.
Yeah. Right. As you say your grandmother had 8 children?
8 children, and they live in one house, in one room, was a kitchen and bedroom and everything. But then later in life, my grandfather was a tailor and very good one in the Bulgarian part of Macedonia, the best. And he makes some money and he built a bigger house, and then they have more space, but they survive. And my grandmother was proud of her children, proud of her fate, of her children, and never bothered herself that she didn't have an expensive car, that she didn't have a fancy clothes. So I think how you said is the mentality and the setup of the mentality of the people. Like, I don't want to give up my nice car for paying for the children. I want my holidays twice a year. And
they're attached too much to materialistic things rather than thinking long term in the future. Like, even, I'm very in for this topic, I'm just 16 now. But in general, I would love to have children, and, it being in a younger age, so that it's fair to the child that I would be able to provide not only the financial support, but also the energy, because at the end of the day, when you have a 2-year-old crying, it'd be selfish if I didn't have the energy to provide for when that's needed. And I feel like a lot of people, they think, oh well, not this year, or maybe not in the next upcoming few years, because I just want to have fun, or as my dad touched on the materialistic side, and they kind of give up on these excuses and they just follow through on them, and then by the time they realize, oh, maybe I want a child, they're kind of in their later years, we'll say, where they can't even give that energy, even if they want to, just naturally they just can't give that energy, which I don't think is fair. And I think that that's also with the mentality that they grow up, that one thing leads on to another.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the other thing on top of that is, so some of it is about selfishness and materialism, and you can, in a kind of a negative way, but
Yeah.
but I think the other thing is, one thing you see across a lot of different areas is people have a lot of choice, and with choice kind of comes an anxiety about making the right decision.
Yeah.
And I think younger people are more anxious these days, and so they're almost like, it'd be easier just to not have kids. Whereas in the past, I get the sense, at least in my parents' generation, you were just expected to have kids.
Yeah.
It's not like you had a choice. It was almost like
That's
just what you
yeah,
do.
yeah, that's what you do. You get married and have children.
Yeah.
Even I remember in Bulgaria, when I was a child or a teenager, they look at the women who are not married. They're already passing 25. Even the generation before that was talking about that. A woman once reached 25 should be married, and if it's a blessed, she should have children or at least one child. Then nowadays I see not only Irish girls but Bulgarians say, oh, 25, no way, I won't get married 25, and I won't have children until I'm late 30s or whatever. And it's strange how the things change completely, the set of the mentality of the people, and this is the problem for the declining of the population. But also in Europe, would you think that maybe the individual states and the EU policy in general, they don't kind of encourage people to have families? I don't want to go to sexuality and things like that, but generally speaking, I don't see that. I don't know if you support this, and maybe in the United States as well, they don't have enough policies and goals to encourage people to get married and have children. Do you not think that this is one of the problems there?
Yeah, I think that's part of it, and I think for example, in the U.S., the tax system, and maybe I'm not sure actually in Ireland, favors you if you're married. So there are kind of some pro kind of family kind of marriage policies. And what strikes me though about the policy side of it is, so if it's about cost and economics and those kind of things, then you could, hypothetically just make it more affordable and people will have more kids. But we don't think that's not what it's about, right? So if it's psychological, so I think it's beyond that. And so I was talking to somebody from China actually at that wedding, and they were saying, well, they're easing off on the one-child policy type things, but they're really struggling to get people to increase their number of kids.
Because they have already set up minds.
Yeah.
One and that's it.
They have a setup and they have a way of thinking about it. And so we don't really know how to incentivize people in a good way to have kids. It's a pretty serious belief system.
It's funny how some people, very small percentage, not only in Ireland, everywhere in Europe, saying, oh, look at these immigrants coming in, so many immigrants, there are too many. And at the same time, the same people who say they don't have children. I mean, who's going to get these jobs, low-paid jobs or whatever? People come from the other countries and they will take these jobs and these opportunities. So we can't blame the others for the decline, isn't it? It's ourselves.
And then there's the tricky other balance, which you hear more of these days, which is because of climate change and environmental issues. People say, well, there's too many people on the planet. So
That's
you can be sympathetic both ways.
Do you think in United States, in Europe, they should spend more money for social services, for example, social housing? Maybe that can tackle the problem of declining of the population in the United States. For example, we know in the United States, in generally speaking, the urban areas and in Dublin here in Ireland, it's extremely expensive really to buy a house and to have a well-being family. it's good to have space, because if it's not enough space, even studying social activities, there is that's count. If it's too many people in one room, it's count as hidden homelessness. So do you think if the United States, different states, of course, decide, and EU for more social housing, that can tackle the problem, and maybe people will be more happy and more encouraged to have children and families if there is more affordable housing?
Yeah, maybe so. It's hard to say how much of the decline in fertility is about, housing. But I do think the one thing we know for sure about kids' development and what happens to them as they move into adulthood, having a stable childhood, in a house where you're not moving around too much, and ideally where there's two parents in the household and those kind of things, really has a big positive long-term effect. And so, I think social policies that aim to stabilize childhood environments and are absolutely a good thing, I think. But you brought up homelessness, and so I think that's, maybe you can actually speak to that, which is I don't know how you reverse that problem. Not many places have done a great job, I think, of and that's why it's so concerning in Dublin with the housing crisis, because it's once people kind of enter that system, how do you get them back out of it? I'm not really. It's a really difficult problem. So you have to stop it from happening in the first place.
Yeah, that's the big thing. My research is prevention. Prevention is very important, and what preventions we take to it. We always look the problem. Oh, it's a homeless. Now it's a problem. No, we have to all the scholars saying that who are deep into this and make a research that prevention is extremely important. Prevention, because the problem is bigger when it's there. So it's better to solve this problem before even become a problem. And that's what I think most of the Europe is facing, the EU, and including Ireland. Ireland spending a lot of money for homelessness. I know it's a lot of homeless people, but Ireland is, generally speaking, is a good example fighting homelessness. But of course, the battle is not won, and the war is not won. So, but again, in my opinion, the Irish government shift to building 20-30 years ago, there were more cooperational houses, and people could afford it. We were building hundreds and hundreds and thousands of them. Now everything is in private hands in Ireland, and I think that's a mistake, because profit before people. So when this comes, you forget about social housing and social services, better social services in general. And homelessness is it's a huge problem, and I think it's a mirror of our society. If we see bigger homelessness, it's in my opinion, is we fail as a society. If we have people in the street sleeping, especially roof sleepers, how they call it, roof sleepers, it's a really big failure. And unfortunately, I see in America the statistics, they are frightening. In LA, it's 30,000 homeless people, only in LA itself, the city, and this is a huge number. And comparing Ireland and the statistics of Ireland, Europe in general, EU countries and United States, usually the homelessness of the population is around 5%. United States, in Europe is a little above or under 1%, which it shows that maybe generally Europe and EU fighting a bit better with homelessness. They're far from solve the problem, but
no contest.
And sometimes the state has to take care of it. As a society, I think we have to as well put a pressure on the government and say, look, you have to do something about it. I will do, but it's proof, for example, that charity is great. Ireland is a great country, and as an example, how many people, I think more than 200,000 people work for charity organizations, and most of them, they don't get paid. They doing it out of good heart, which Ireland is very good with that. But not every country is like that. And it's not enough to give 10 euro or 20 euro or 100 euro or go work a few hours. It's great help, but it's not enough. It's not enough. The state has to as well take a huge part of fighting homelessness.
Absolutely.
And yeah, well, Dylan, I enjoy the conversation with you. This podcast is really amazing one, and I hope our viewers and listeners enjoy it as well. I really thanking you for coming in today and chat with me and my co-host Kubrat
Thank you
Ivanov.
from me for joining us. Obviously, you're a very special guest all the way from America, and having your knowledge here on the table with us. I hope the viewers that are watching us were also just as intrigued as we were. And for anybody that's watching, if you enjoyed the video, hit the like button, and if you want to see more videos like these, just hit the subscribe button and the notification bell, and we'll catch you in the next one.